So we have a lot of momentum in this community right now, and a lot of you in this room are reasons for that. So thank you very much for being here. My name is Jacob Wayman, and I'm the chapter director for Startup Grind Wichita. And for those that are new to Startup Grind, what we're going to have is a fireside chat. So what that simply is a conversation between me and two folks here from our community. So during this time, we'd love for you guys to stay engaged. You guys can take pictures, tweet at Startup Grind ICT, hashtag Startup Grind. And we are actually going to be doing a little bit something different towards the end of this interview with these folks that's going to engage you guys a little bit more, so be ready for that. But without further ado, I'm going to bring up our speakers. So the first one I'll introduce is actually Ben Hutton. Ben, if you want to come join me up on stage, give him a round of applause, people. So Ben is the presidency or just CEO?
Just the CEO.
Just CEOs. So Ben is the CEO of Hutton Construction, and I think Ben has been in construction ever since he was like 2 years old and he can lift a hammer. So he actually worked in the family business back when it first got started, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But Ben took over the reins in 2010 of taking over the organization as CEO, and it since then has grown up substantially. So we're going to talk a little bit more of that during this conversation, so give Ben a round of applause. Our next speaker we have to bring on stage is Jason Cox, president of Cox Machine. Let's give him a round of applause. Jason is the president of Cox Machine, an organization that was actually started by his grandfather, I believe, back in 1954. So he is a third generation leader of this organization. Jason actually didn't mean to get into the business, and so we'll talk a little about that, but he's a very educated individual. He's got dual degrees from K-State University, so who are my Wildcats in here? Got a couple of them. There we go. Go Wildcats. There you go. I'm actually a Wichita State grad, so I won't hold that hat against him. There we go. But both of these gentlemen are leaders in their family businesses. And for many of you in this community, you maybe not think that entrepreneurship is in family businesses, but I think it's at the core of everything that they do on a daily basis. So that's what we're going to do today. So let's give our speakers another round of applause for being on stage with us. How you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, let's go a little bit back into your guys' childhood. You know, I'm gonna since I think Jason's the oldest one here, so I'm gonna let age before beauty. Is that right? Age before beauty. Well, Jason, share with us a little bit about what your childhood was like. You know, your family had started the business in 1954. So, what were your interests when you were a kid?
Yeah, my granddad started the business, and my father took over in 1972 before I was born. So, growing up, I was always around the business. My father was always working, in and around the business. He brought work home with him. He always had plenty of time to spend with us kids, but he brought home drawings from customers to quote, and so I was around that growing up. Myself personally, the main thing I liked to do when I was a kid was take things apart. So I just, would take things and take them apart and try to put them back together, which didn't always work, but sometimes did. And then as I got older, I started, my first job was at the shop sweeping floors when I was probably, same with you, right? Too young to actually be working. So,
Yep.
yeah, so sweeping floors with my friends. And then as I got older, I worked in the shop a little bit more. But then I didn't work in the shop for a long time, and we can talk about that later. But.
My grandfather used to tell me something funny because I grew up in a family business that there's no child labor laws in family businesses. Well, Ben, talk a little bit about how your childhood was. Your dad started the business when you were a kid. I think you started while you were in elementary school. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Dad actually started our business in 1992, and I was 11 that year. And so I didn't grow up my whole childhood in it, but for a lot of it, it's been a part of my life, or was a part of my life. But growing up, I was always also a little bit mechanically inclined. Of course, Dad being in construction, even before he started our company, I was around job sites a lot. That was the topic of conversation around the house. He's a woodworker, and so I grew up doing that with him as his hobby, and that's become my hobby now. And so there was always projects going on. But when Dad started the business in 1992, it was that next year, and you can do the math, I was 12 when I got to start sweeping floors. And so, yeah.
Well, and since the core of Startup Grind is around entrepreneurship, then I believe that you actually were a little bit of an entrepreneur when you were a kid. Something about you had a younger brother. I don't know.
Yeah, so the story goes that year he started our business in 92. I was 11 and I stayed home that summer. But he had decided that a good job for me was to rebuild our fence. And so he was going to pay me $8 a panel, sort of the 8-foot panels, to rebuild this fence, and he bought the materials. And I decided, having learned what Dad does, that it would be a good idea to hire my brother for $2 an hour to do the work for me, right? And so I subcontracted the work. So that was actually my first experience as a general contractor.
Now, Jason, did you have the... Oh.
My mom found out about it, though, and she killed that plan, so.
Well, and Jason, you've always, been into cars, I think almost your entire life with cars. Talk a little bit about when you were growing up and how that kind of just intrigued you with, mechanical engineering and just everything you used to do with those.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the taking things apart and not being able to put them back together again. But I have always been into cars. My grandfather worked on motorcycles. My grandfather's father was a bus mechanic for the city. And so I grew up in my grandfather's garage and my father's garage working on cars and motorcycles. I helped my dad rebuild an engine when I was 12. That's the first time that I remember helping rebuild an engine was when I was 12 years old. But I did it before that, I think, too. And so then when I got into high school, I spent all of my money on my car, everything, every penny I had went into my car, trying to soup it up, make it faster or better.
So both of you guys are leaders in your businesses now, but what did you want to be when you were, go back to your 8-year-old self. What did you say, I want to be?
I wanted to be an ice cream man. I read this book about a guy that bought an old van and fixed it up and sold ice cream out of it. And I thought, man, this would be the best job in the world.
Yeah, so I actually alternated between a Navy SEAL and a youth pastor, neither of which worked out. So.
Well, fast forward into your college years. You guys both chose to go to K-State, and you both chose to be, you went into construction, Ben, and then you went into engineering, Jason. So kind of, what made you guys choose those paths of education?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually my sophomore year in high school when I made the decision that I actually wanted to go into construction and make that my career. And so from there, it was really a logical choice for me to go to the construction management program at K-State. That was also the only subsidized schooling option that I had at the time. And so also made the decision pretty easy.
I decided when I was in probably my freshman year of high school that I wanted to go into either engineering or architecture and started down that path. So unlike a lot of kids, I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do at the time. And so I went that direction and started taking those classes. Actually, I was in drafting class with, where'd Matt go? He's in here somewhere. Where's Matt? We were in drafting together back in I don't know when that was, 89. So I decided to go into engineering and then went to K-State. They had a good engineering school, so I went there and I got an undergrad and graduate degree in engineering and then ended up going to work in engineering before I went into the family business.
Well, and growing up in a family business, some people think you have it easy. It's like, yeah, my parents own a business, they've had success and, they think it's easy for you. Talk about what that really felt like growing up in that business, and really what the day-to-day life was.
I think that it's fair to say that there's a lot of people that had it worse, right? I mean, it's not a bad thing to grow up with parents who are entrepreneurial or have a business and to be around that. It's a privileged way to grow up. But that said, I always felt like I needed to work, a little bit harder than everyone else around me in the business in order not to be the boss's kid. So to not have that feeling that I was being given something for free, even though in effect I am. I mean, I always felt like I needed to appreciate that and to work a little harder.
Yeah, my story is similar. I mean, I think you see it portrayed in the movies. You see entitled people, right, or entitled next generations coming up in their business, and they take advantage of that opportunity. Uh, I've seen the opposite occur in most family businesses, in that the next generation feels obligated to work harder and prove themselves and not succeed just because they happen to have the same last name as the current owner. And so that was my experience. I started sweeping floors, and then I dug ditches, and then I swept floors on job sites and organized tools, and I did the hard jobs, but I did those alongside some of the same people that I work with today, and that experience was incredibly beneficial for me as I learned about our business and I learned about the people that make it successful, and it was also incredibly beneficial for me today because it really helped me build credibility with the rest of our team.
Well, and Jason, after you graduated from K-State, why'd you choose to come back to Wichita?
Well, let me back up and say when I went to K-State, there were three things that I did not want to do. I didn't want to move back to Wichita. I did not want to work in the family business, and I sure as hell didn't want to work in aerospace, because aerospace is up and down and crazy. And so that was the mindset that I had leaving town. And obviously things have changed a little bit, but I came back to Wichita because of the opportunity. At the time it was Cessna, so I had an opportunity to use my brand new engineering degree, and come back and work in aerospace. And I had, during the time I was in college, I decided that Wichita was actually not such a bad place. And now, today, it really isn't a bad place. It's a fantastic place. But in 2000, it wasn't as good as it is today. So but I decided it was going to be worth the shot.
Well, and Ben, you knew in high school that you wanted to get into the family business and work into the leadership position, but you chose a different path before you came back to Hutton. Talk a little about why you chose that different path.
Yeah, so after K-State, I actually spent a few years working in Colorado Springs for a different contractor. And that was a decision that I made mutually with my dad at the time. He wanted me to go and get experience outside of the family business, and I wanted that as well. And it was something, or it is something that I recommend to all family businesses now. I mean, being able to work outside of the family business gave me the chance to prove to myself that I could be successful in the industry outside of our family umbrella. It also gave me a chance to learn a totally different way of doing things in our industry, and I got to bring that back when I returned home. And then it also helped me, again, build some credibility with my team now. They know that I was successful other places and could have stayed there. Leaving Colorado Springs was a tough thing to do. It's a great community, and we had a lot of good friends there. And so it wasn't a decision that we took lightly. And in fact, it's something that we thought about for a long time before we actually did.
Well, and Jason, you didn't want to go into family business. So when was that kind of that point where you said, or even that conversation that you had, that this is what you have to do?
Yeah, it was in 2003, and our business, Cox Machine, was changing and growing, and they were adding another layer of management into the company. And my father approached me and said, if you want to get into the company, now's a great time to do it, because we're growing, we're expanding, and we're adding another layer, and there's a spot for you here if you want to come in now. There may not be later, now there is, and so that's when I went in.
Well, and what kind of pressure did you feel when you made that decision from putting in the resignation with Cessna and then transitioning over to do Cox Machine? I mean, that's a leap. That's a leap of faith.
I just didn't have any idea what I was doing. I mean, I went from I felt pretty comfortable as a mechanical engineer, having no one work for me. I mean, I was at the I liked what I was doing, but I didn't have any employees. And so I went from that into a production manager with probably 30 employees, I guess, all of whom knew exactly how to do their job, and I didn't know any of it. So it was, I just didn't know what I was doing, so I just did it.
Well, so how'd you build credibility with them when you did that?
It was helped a little bit by some of them I knew, because it was a family business, so I'd grown up around them, and they didn't hate me, so that was good. And apart from that, I mean, it sounds corny, but I just try to treat everyone with respect in general, but especially in this situation. So I know that they know a lot more than I do about everything that's happening there, and there's no reason for me to act any differently than to treat them with respect and listen to everything they have to say. So.
Yeah, I think the respect piece is the key, and it took me a while to realize, but I think it's nearly universally true that as a leader or a manager, very rarely do you have the answer. Usually, the people that you're working with or leading are the ones that have the answer, and so it's your job to ask the questions and to listen and to put all of that information together to help get the organization or the team to where it needs to be. But it's not really, it's not you, it's them.
Well, Ben, I've heard you tell the story before about that transition from your dad to you in that leadership role, and kind of and talk about the feelings that you had going through that and how you processed through.
You want me to tell the story?
You can. Keep it short.
Yeah, so I came back in 2006, and I worked my way up through the business, and I went and I got an MBA at Friends, and I did all the things that I needed to do to prepare myself to take over leadership of our business. And in July of 2010, it had come time to make that change, and so on a Friday, my dad moved all of his stuff out of his office, and then on a Sunday afternoon, I went and I was going to move my stuff in, right? And so I get to the office, and I walk down the hall, and it feels different than I expected. And when I get to the office, it's totally empty except for this baton, like a racing baton, standing upright on a table, right? And it knocked me back a little bit, because you go and you pick it up and it's this hollow plastic tube, but inside of that was all of the responsibility that I was getting ready to take over, right? So at the time we had about 100 employees, and they all had families, and I was now going to be responsible for their livelihood and their safety, and it was an incredible weight that I felt. And so I thought over the last few years, ever since I was a sophomore in high school, I had done everything that I could possibly do to get ready for that day, and none of it really helped. So I wasn't as ready as I thought, and it's worked out because I have a fantastic team, but the weight of that position, or any leadership position, I think is really hard to feel until you're actually in it.
So now you guys are both leaders at the company. You can kick back and relax, put your feet up, and just, tell people what to do, right?
Yeah, pretty much you got it.
Yeah, it's super easy.
Well, each of you are now the leaders of the organizations, and I've heard you guys both speak on separate occasions about culture and team. And that's something that's very core to any leader of an organization. But you guys were provided the opportunity to take over a family business. But so how do you make a business your own? I get deep with my questions.
How do you make it your own?
Well, because you guys are now the leaders of the organizations, and you guys have had cultures that both your fathers had established before you, and your grandfather before you, Jason. And so now it is your responsibility to make Hutton Construction Ben Hutton.
Yeah, my father and I agree a lot on what's important in the business, so was not that hard in my situation. The changes that I've made are not fundamental changes to the business. The fundamentals of the business are the same as they have been. I mean, things like good cash management and low debt and dealing with integrity with your customers. These are things that are not going to change. So I think if I've made any changes, it's been introducing some of the new technology that's available now that wasn't then. And even that's not a change, because that's been something that's been going on for a long time. But so I think back to your question about how do you make it your own. I think in my case it was making the company somewhere that I would want to go work, and talking to other people about what they're looking for in a company and making it a place that they would want to go work. To me, that's what I want to do with the company. We want to supply aerospace parts. We want to be a great supplier. But more importantly than that is I want it to be a place that people want to work, and that is a place that you would want to go every day.
Yeah, I'd say my story is similar in that I joined a business that was led by a person before me that I share an incredible amount in common with. So the business that my dad started had the same values that we have today. I haven't changed them. I do think of it more as like refining a metal, right? And so I heat it up and I take out those small imperfections, and then it becomes more and more of itself and a purer representation of what we want our business to be. And so I also, though, have a little bit of an aversion of looking at it as my business, right? I mean, I am one of 240 people right now that make up Hutton Construction, and my ability to influence it is maybe large, but it's not that much larger than our carpenters or laborers on our job sites. They're the ones that interact with our customers even more than I do sometimes, right? And so they are as much a representative of our business as I am, and they have as much ability to impact the culture on that job site with all of our subcontractors as I do. And so it's my job, I think, to I guess to really get at your question, to talk about the values of our business in a really clear way, in a consistent way, so that when they come across opportunities to put those into play, they know what we all collectively stand for.
Well, both your industries are drastically changing before your eyes, and entrepreneurship is defined as taking risk, and behind entrepreneurship is innovation. So how have you guys really taken entrepreneurship at your core to really make your own path as you guys lead the organizations?
Yeah, I wanted to lead off by just saying that I don't really consider myself an entrepreneur in the way that my father was or my grandfather was. I mean, they took much larger risks with much more at stake to try to make things happen. But that aside, I think as our industry changes, and any industry changes, you have to make changes if you want to stay at the front of what's happening. And in aerospace, there are a whole lot of things happening in the supply chain in general related to cost reduction, resourcing, and outsourcing, offshoring. And we can battle that with the rise in automation and technology. So a lot of what Cox Machine does is try to figure out new ways to use automation and technology in our business, and I consider that to be an entrepreneurial direction that we would be taking inside the family business. And then we've also just opened a new product line, a new division that is actually outside of aerospace. We're calling it Tech in Space, but it's satellites and semiconductor fabrication equipment. And so this is a fledgling organization inside of our larger organization that is basically a startup, that is a self-funded startup. So we have one employee right now, and we're putting a whole bunch of R&D dollars into it to try to grow this from a seed.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. Not sure I can say it much better. The only thing I might add is I think family businesses especially, but many kind of multi-generational businesses, they get caught in this trap of doing things the way they've always done it because of tradition, right? So tradition is a much stronger word in a family business than it is in a startup or a tech business or something else. And so it's easy to get caught in this trap of not wanting to rock the boat because that's how dad did it, or not wanting to change things because we're the leader in our industry and we don't want to lose that position. But if you aren't willing to experiment, to listen to customers and always be out in front of them, then you're going to lose that position really quickly. And so you can't get caught in this tradition trap.
Absolutely. Now, you guys both have leadership teams that surround you in your organization. How important is your team to you guys in your businesses?
Incredibly important. I actually have made a change over this last year or so. As I went through leading our business for 5 or 6 years, I began to notice I was doing a lot of things that I could do, but I wasn't the best person to be doing, right? And so I had to have the humility to say, Andy, I think you should do this, or Laura, I think you need to help us with this other activity, and really began to delegate or delegate away my responsibilities and promote other people to take those on. And so I made the last move in that chain about a year or so ago when I promoted somebody to be president of our business. So when you introduced me, you asked if I was president. No, I'm not. My skill set is not in the day-to-day management of my business. That's something that Andy Busling does a fantastic job at. My job, as the way I see it, is to look out 5 years and make sure we're in the right place. My job is to make sure we have good relationships with our team members and good relationships with our clients. And so that's where I get to focus now. Now, I couldn't do that, though, if I did not have a team that I trusted 100% to take care of all of the other things. I can do those things, but I know that I'm not the best at them.
Yeah, the team is absolutely critical. When I became president, we had a 4-person management team, senior leadership team, and without them, I would have failed. I mean, that's how critical it is. So it's extremely important to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, especially in certain areas that you are weak in, and all of you together will always make a better decision. And of course, the more diverse that team is, the better decision they'll make as well.
If you guys could define your culture in a sentence, what would you define it as?
Culture, or like our company culture, or just culture in general?
Your company culture.
Go ahead.
Thanks. We're a family, and we talk about that a lot. We recently got to define the purpose of our business, and that's to build up our employees' lives, our clients' visions, and our community's future, right? And so those are the 3 things that we focus on, and we actually focus on them in that order. So we take care of our people first, and when we do a good job of that, they'll take great care of our clients, and then because of the success we've had there, we can do great things in our community. And so I guess those are the 3 things that I'd say define our culture.
Our culture, as I mentioned, I want to be a good place to work, and we want to support families, family-oriented that way. And then on the operational side of things, our culture is to improve constantly. So we drive continuous improvement a lot, which is buzzwordy, but that's what we do. So we have a whole lot of continuous improvement activity, trying to improve efficiencies and improve operations in general. And I think culturally, the people that work for us, they accept it, but I think more than just accepting it, I think that they realize that it does make us better when we're engaged in those activities, and they're engaged as well.
When you both are very active in our community in big ways, and how important is the community of Wichita to you, and why?
You know, it's where we all live. So I think it's partially our responsibility to try to, we, Cox Machine, try to keep as much of the work as we can here, to support jobs and support a lot of the money staying in town. You know, a lot of our competitors have been purchased by larger conglomerates that have their headquarters outside of town, so the jobs stay here, but maybe the money goes out. That's better than the alternative, which is the work totally goes out and you lose the jobs and the money. And so I feel like we have the opportunity to help that problem by keeping jobs here and keeping the money in our community. The community for me includes also Harper, so we have a Harper, Kansas facility, the region anyway. And I think, everyone that works for us lives in this region, and we produce in this region, and so it's important to try to focus on what you can do to make things better for everyone that's involved and not just a small part of it.
Yeah, I grew up here. I love Wichita, hashtag. But seriously, when Aaron and I lived in Colorado Springs in 2006 and made a decision to move back here, we thought about what the city was like. That happens every day in our country somewhere, right? We have thousands of kids that grow up in our community. They go to school here, they go to school at Wichita State or K-State, and then they get to make a decision on where they want to move and build their life. Or hopefully they come here. Sometimes they go someplace else and contemplate coming back at a later time, and I want to be the city that they want to live in. That is critical to the success of all of our businesses in this room, but it's also just critical to the success of the vibrancy of our community. And so as a leader of my business, I get to have a platform with at least the 250 people that I work with every day to talk about how important it is to be involved. But sometimes you get to stretch that platform and talk about it with the whole city. So this is where I get to put in a plug for Project Wichita. If you have not been involved in Project Wichita yet, look it up online. It's on Facebook. Also, yeah, you are involved. It is an exciting thing going on in our city right now because we all get to have a voice of what we want it to be in the future. That's important, and so I hope you'll take that chance.
Well, and this is where the audience is going to get involved. So we're going to do, if I can get the next slide. Benny, help me out here. So this is a new application that's out there I want you guys to explore. So this is called Slido. So if you go to slido.com and input J375, and this is where you guys are going to ask your questions. So you guys can actually input your questions on this, and your questions will pop up on the screen. And so if you guys have some, this is where we want to engage with you. Instead of having to walk around the mic with you, this kind of lets you kind of hide behind your phone a little bit and ask a question if you have one. So as they're kind of doing that and getting input in there, do you guys have any last words before they start going with you questions?
Last words.
Last words. Last words. Well, you guys are both involved in some things outside of Hutton Construction and Cox Machine. You know, so you have your own entrepreneurial ventures out there. So what opportunities are you guys looking for within the community and elsewhere too?
I have a different thing to talk about. Can I talk about something?
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking about my last words. Ben and I talked briefly. This is all completely unscripted. I know you couldn't tell. We didn't have any idea what we were going to talk about, but we did talk briefly about how we view entrepreneurialism in general. And one of the topics we talked about was the working very hard for the sake of working hard.
Yeah.
And we both had feelings about that. And if I would want to give any advice, I'm not really old enough to give advice, but if I wanted to give some, I think that it's important to think about the work that you're putting in every day and whether it's productive. Because it's easy to work hard and you can work for a lot of hours, and sometimes that becomes the only thing that you're working for, is to show that you've worked that many hours, and if it's not productive, I don't like it.
Yeah, I think a really damaging word for the startup community or for the whole business community in general is hustle. People take a lot of pride in how hard they hustle, and so I don't like that. I've been in that spot, and I burned myself out a few years ago because that's where I was, and so I think we need to reevaluate how we measure the value we create with the work we put in, because making money or working lots of hours is not the only thing in this world.
Yeah, my job really is to figure out how to reduce or eliminate everything that everyone's doing in my company. I mean, that's basically what I'm doing, including myself. So if I'm doing repetitive tasks or I'm doing something that takes a long time, part of my job is to figure out how I can not do that or automate it or do something else with it to free up my time. So we got questions.
We do have questions. So I'm going to get the one who gets to choose the questions. So what is the biggest threat to your family's business?
Probably me, because I come up with a lot of crazy ideas. And so seriously, I mean, I like to dream about what's possible, right? That's part of what I think my skill set is to look way out and say, well, that could be cool, or to take ideas from different industries and put them together with an idea from that industry and see how that might affect our company. I have to have a really great team that balances me out with a little dose of reality every once in a while to keep us on track. I guess somewhat related to that, immediate threat to my business is the shortage of skilled labor in our country. We did ourselves a disservice for a number of years in the United States by not saying that going into a trade or building things with your hands can be a fantastic career. And so now, across the country, in every industry that people build things with their hands, we have a shortage, and it's going to be a big deal.
Jason, this one's for you. You're so well dressed all the time. Where do you get your suits?
Gotta figure out who sent that. I know who sent it. You really want me to answer that question?
Absolutely.
If you want to know, hit me up. There's a place in Chicago that makes cheap tailored suits. So they're not that expensive, and they're custom tailored, and they're terrific. So I'll tell you about it. If you want to hashtag me or something, email me.
Yeah, there you go. This one's from Jesse. Did you feel pressured to enter the family business, or did your family let the chips fall where they may?
For me, I was actually pressured to not enter the family business. So my dad encouraged me to pursue lots of different opportunities. When I decided I wanted to go into construction, he encouraged me to pursue that via an architecture or an architectural engineering degree, which I didn't do because the math was harder. I'd say the opposite.
I agree. I totally agree. So my father told me from when I was very young that he didn't necessarily want me to go into aerospace, didn't necessarily want me to go into the family business, that if it was something I wanted to pursue, that was great, but it was a cyclic business, and it was kind of a rough business because of that, and he would be totally happy if I did something different.
Well, kind of on that note, another question that came in was, what was the biggest dream you didn't chase?
The biggest what?
The biggest dream you didn't chase.
The ice cream truck?
There's still time.
You know, it's going to sound weird, but it's something that I think about still. So when I was a sophomore, I decided I wanted to do construction, right? And the logical choice for me was to go to K-State and pursue a construction management degree. At the same time, I was also in the last class that went through Kansas high schools that K-State, KU, and WSU had to accept you no matter what, right? And so I did not try very hard in high school. I didn't take the ACT. And I took it once when I was a sophomore, but I never took it again. And now I look back and I say, I got a fantastic education at Kansas State. Well, I didn't even try to do anything different than that. And I kind of wonder what might have been.
I applied to MIT and got rejected, so I didn't have to chase that one.
And this question is from Alicia. What would you say is the most crucial part of creating a sustainable family business?
I think the most sustainable part of any business in general is a low debt load. I mean, if you keep your debt ratio low enough, then no matter what happens in the business cycle or in the industry, you can recover and you still have cash flow. If you take on too much debt and if you grow too quickly, then if things turn the other way, you run out of cash and then you're in trouble. That's nothing to do with the family business at all, but that's just in general our philosophy.
My answer would be actually very close to the third value that you list here, help others before you help yourself. I don't think that we can expect to be paid until we create value for our customers. I don't think I should expect people to work for me unless I create value for them over and above even what I'm paying them. And so I think we have to always be evaluating how much value we can create for other people by helping them with the skills that we have.
I'm looking through the questions. This is a great question. How important is your wife in supporting your business endeavors?
My wife's out there, right there, raise your hand. Yeah. So, you can't. There's no way that I could do what.
You want me to answer that?
Yeah. there's no way that I can do what I'm doing without my wife's support and without, I mean, she's my best friend and she's my greatest supporter. And I would not be able to, I'd probably be able to function in the business, but there's no way that I could be able to do some of the other things that I'm doing. So it's, if you have to spend a lot of your mental energy worrying about what's, you know, if what you're doing is something that your wife would support or not support, or if it's something that is going the wrong direction in your marriage or your relationship, that's a lot of mental energy expended upon that keeps you from doing some of the other things we're talking about. So.
Yes. No, I'd say incredibly important. I mean, as the leader of my business, there's some things that I don't get to talk about with anybody except Aaron, right? And so a lot of things get worked out on a walk around the neighborhood at night or sitting in the hot tub. So.
You guys both oversee the building of things. If you could build anything, what would it be?
Here in Wichita, a new convention center and performing arts facility. Where's our vice mayor? I saw him here.
I mean, we get to build aerospace parts, and honestly, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with that. So I guess I would like to build more parts for somebody like SpaceX or ULA, or you know, more into exploration of space. That's just kind of my nerdy thing that I'd like to do.
What's the biggest mistake? This question's asked, what's the biggest mistake a startup can make, but what's the biggest mistake that you guys have made in your businesses, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, so I had a startup that was also my biggest mistake. A few years ago, we tried to do a patio home development. It would have been more fun and less expensive to buy a Ferrari and just run it into a wall. It was horrible, but I learned so much from that. I had the wrong person running it. We had the wrong value proposition for the market. I didn't lead, I didn't engage with the leader I had correctly. I mean, and so as I look back, it costs a lot of money and a lot of pride. But I've probably gotten it back in other experiences that I've been able to do differently. So if that counts as a mistake, that's it.
I've made a lot. It's hard to choose, but I think the biggest one that comes to mind quickly is not understanding some of the ramifications of contract clauses. So all of my lawyers in the crowd, this is a free one for you. We had a customer that we sold a $60 part to that sent us a claim for $1.2 million. So, and they almost could do that. Not quite, but almost.
So you guys talked about a little bit about, you know, everybody's all about that hustle hard. And the question is how do you personally create work-life balance?
I've got a particular thing that I did a few years ago, which was to, on my phone, I turned off the notifications on my work email. And it sounds like a dumb thing, but it made a huge difference for me, because if I have notifications on my phone on my work email, then anywhere I'm at, anytime, it'll go off and I gotta look at it. I could have been up here, so, oh, who's emailing me? You know, oh, it's okay, it's no big deal. So I was doing that all the time. So I turned them off because the people that, if they need to reach me, they will text me. I mean, the people that need to reach me have my text number, and if they need to get me, they'll text me. And mostly they don't. Mostly the emails that you get aren't really that important. I mean, really, mostly what I do isn't really that important. So, I mean, people, it's true. So people send me emails, and you think you might have to address them right then and you know, really tackle it. And really you don't. They can wait till tomorrow normally. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. If I gave any of you practical advice, it'd be to totally delete the email off your phone. I don't think it's productive. The other thing that I've learned to do just in the last couple of years is look out. At the beginning of each year, I look out over the year that's coming up, and I schedule the family or personal things I want to do, and then everything else gets to fit in around those. It used to be, we would talk every few months and say, hey, we should take this vacation, or we need to do this, there was never time in the schedule. And so now I put those in the schedule first.
Am I still on? There we go. What's your favorite hobby that inspires you?
I learned it growing up from my dad, but woodworking is my hobby. I love it because, one, I like to work and build things with my hands, and I don't get to do that anymore. My job is at a desk or behind a computer or talking with somebody, and so I don't get to build anything. So I love woodworking, but it's also a creative outlet for me. I get to create something that nobody else tells me what to do. And also it's very loud and dusty in my shop, and so people leave me alone there.
We talked about the fact that I like cars and like to work on cars, but apart from that, I restore full-size arcade games. So I got about 20 arcade games from my childhood that I've bought and cosmetically and electronically restored. I was going to dual major in electrical engineering, and I never did, but I took a bunch of classes anyway, so I like working on them, and it's therapeutic for me. It might take me, I don't know, 6 months to finish a game. It doesn't matter. It's therapeutic. Same for you.
Yeah.
What piece of advice that you would give to a new entrepreneur or new business leader today?
We've already given a couple. You more?
Well, if you had one thing to say to them, one, they said, how do I be a great leader?
How do you be a great leader? Ask questions. I would, something I did when I came back to Wichita that I don't regret is I got involved in a lot of things, and I met a lot of people, and I asked to go to lunch or go to coffee with those people and just to learn or know them. And those relationships have lasted a long time, and they pay dividends all the time now. And hopefully I've helped as much as I've gained, but something I really appreciate actually about Wichita is I don't know that there's but a handful of people that if you called and said, hey, I want to take you to coffee, they wouldn't say yes, right? I mean, we're a very open and supportive community, especially over the last few years as kind of the entrepreneurship ecosystem has begun to really blossom again.
My suggestion is nothing new about this. Is just surround yourself with people that are smarter than you or more knowledgeable than you or have more experience than you, and then listen to them.
And with the last question, it's something that we do at 1 Million Cups, and it's what can we as a Wichita community do to help you?
I think our biggest challenge, Ben mentioned it as well, is the workforce. And it's going to continue to be a challenge in Wichita. And as far as technical skilled labor that we're talking about, everyone understands that this is a problem. Everybody knows the problem exists. And there's a whole lot of people working on the problem, and there's a whole lot of great things happening. But I think in general that's going to be a problem going forward for any industry that needs technically skilled people in Wichita. I mean, Spirit's about to hire 1,000 people, right? Those are the people that we might also hire. So we've got 280 people. They're going to hire 1,000. I mean, and I'm not going to say that Spirit needs to not hire those people. They do, because we want that work here. But so supporting any initiative that is trying to address the issue of the lack of skilled labor in the region. That's a long sentence, but that's it.
I'd have two answers. The first and important one is to just get involved in the community. You already are by attending something like this, but if there's chances to get involved civically to help shape the direction of our city, please take those opportunities. And then the second one is to take out very large loans and build buildings.
Well, let's give these two gentlemen a round of applause.
Welcome.